I recently read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Robert Kiyosaki learned about money from two dads, his biological father and his best friend's father. Both men worked hard and earned good incomes, but his biological father struggled to pay bills his whole life, while his friend's father became one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. When Kiyosaki's father died, he left bills to be paid. But when his best friend's father died, he left millions of dollars to his family and his favorite charities. In Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Kiyosaki reflects on why his father remained poor and why his friend's father became rich. The answer came down to two fundamental differences. Fundamental difference number one: Poor Dad acquired liabilities. Rich Dad accumulated assets. When Poor Dad started his career, he saved up to buy a new house and a new car. Poor Dad assumed that a house and a car were assets, but like many middle-class people, he didn't understand the difference between assets and liabilities. Assets put money in your pocket, Kiyosaki says, and liabilities take money out of your pocket. It's that simple. Assets produce income, and liabilities create expenses. When Poor Dad bought a new home, he acquired new expenses: property tax, home insurance, home maintenance costs, and a mortgage. Most of Poor Dad's income went to paying down those expenses. Rich Dad took a different approach. Instead of using his savings to buy a house or a new car, he bought income-generating assets. Rich Dad invested in a construction company, 2 restaurants, and a rental property. Rich Dad gradually increased his asset column while keeping his living expenses to a minimum. He drove a beat-up truck instead of taking out a loan to buy a new truck. He lived in a modest home and paid as little rent as possible. When Rich Dad eventually bought a nice home and a nice car, he didn't pay for them. His assets did. The recurring income from his businesses and his rental properties took care of his new home expenses and car payments. Poor Dad worked for money. Rich Dad made money work for him. Later in life, Robert Kiyosaki took this lesson to heart. When Kiyosaki was in his late 20s, he wanted to buy a Porsche. Kiyosaki was making good money as a Xerox salesman, but instead of using his sales commissions to pay the monthly Porsche payments, he used his commissions to make down payments on a few small rental properties. Kiyosaki only bought his dream car when he had enough income coming in from his rental properties to cover the monthly expenses from his Porsche. In the book, he says, once a dollar goes into your asset column, it becomes your employee. The best thing about money is that it works 24 hours a day and can work for generations. Turn more of your money into great employees by reducing your expenses and acquiring income-generating assets. Don't focus your efforts on increasing your paycheck. Focus your efforts on acquiring assets. Look for good income-generating assets in 4 areas. Area number 1, businesses that can be managed by other people. Rich Dad owned several businesses that were run by other people. His businesses required just a few hours of his time each week. Kiyosaki says, if you have to work in a business, it's not a business, it's a job. See my book summary of E-Myth Revisited for more details on how to create a low-maintenance business. Area number 2, stocks and bonds that appreciate and pay dividends. Area number 3, income-generating real estate, like townhomes, apartment complexes, storage units, and commercial buildings. And area number 4, royalties on products and intellectual property, like music, art, and patents you create or buy the rights to sell. When income from your assets can cover your living expenses, you are truly wealthy. You no longer have to show up at a job you don't like just to pay the bills and survive. To paraphrase Buckminster Fuller, the measure of a person's wealth is the number of days they can survive without having to work. When you use your assets to generate the majority of your income, you pay less in taxes, a secret that all rich people know. For example, income from stocks held for more than a year are taxed at 15% instead of at the income tax rate, which can be as high as 37%. Real estate gains are not taxed at all if you use them to buy more real estate, thanks to the 1031 tax deferral in the United States. And assets purchased through a personal corporation, which is how most rich people purchase assets, are taxed at a lower corporate tax rate. Knowing that income from assets is taxed lower than income from your job is just one example of the second difference between rich dad and poor dad. Fundamental difference number 2. Poor dad was a type 1 investor. Rich dad was a type 2 investor. Type 1 investors choose to be ignorant about investing. Type 1 investors are too, quote, busy to come up with an investment strategy. So they just keep their money in a savings account, which doesn't keep up with inflation. Or they give their money to a financial advisor who invests in high commission mutual funds. A type 1 investor is like someone who walks into a computer store and picks a PC off the shelf. A type 2 investor is someone who buys individual PC components and builds her own computer after extensive research online. Type 2 investors make time to learn about investing and constantly look for investing opportunities. A type 2 investor will learn how to invest in private startups before they IPO, or take the time to understand cryptocurrency and other markets that seem too confusing to type 1 investors. Type 2 investors know a little about a lot. Thanks to the wisdom passed down by Rich Dad, Kiyosaki became a type 2 investor. Kiyosaki studied housing markets and how to borrow money for rental property down payments without having to go through a bank. He also found rental homes in housing markets that were trending up and sold them for a significant profit 3 to 5 years later. For example, Kiyosaki bought a small rental property in Oregon when California was having a housing boom. Gradually, buyers in California started coming into Oregon and drove prices up. So Kiyosaki sold his property for a profit and used the money to buy a bigger rental property in Phoenix, which had a depressed housing market at the time, but was trending upward. Become a type 2 investor by developing your financial IQ. Use your spare time to understand economic cycles, emerging markets, business fundamentals, and finance in books, seminars, courses, and podcasts. When you have high financial IQ, your mind is able to see investment opportunities that other people can't see. As Robert Kiyosaki says, there is gold everywhere. Most people are not trained to see it. That was the core message that I gathered from Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. This book will help you develop a strong financial foundation and understand how to make money work for you. I highly recommend it. If you would like a one-page PDF summary of insights that I gathered from this book, just click the link below and I'd be happy to email it to you. If you already subscribe to the free Productivity Game email newsletter, this PDF is sitting in your inbox. If you like this video, hit that like button and share it with a friend. And as always, thanks for watching and have yourself a productive week.